This is Colin O'Keefe of LXPN, and I'm joined today by Ben Stevens. Ben is a Spartanburg, South Carolina-based family lawyer and author of The Mac Lawyer, a blog on using Macs in the practice of law. Today, in the wake of Steve Jobs' passing, we're going to be discussing the impact on Macs in the legal workplace. Ben, you started practicing in 1995, and then you said in 2005 you switched over to a fully Mac-based office. What was the impetus for you doing that, and had you kind of noticed a change in the perception of Apple's in the legal space over those 10 years?
Yeah, definitely. The impetus for the move was we'd been PC based for years and had experienced all the headaches and drama that went along with that, the blue screens of death and the lockups and problems and all that. And it got to the point that the case management program we were demoing at the time just freaked out one time too many on a Friday afternoon, and I literally said, "That's it, I'm done." And so I didn't tell the staff, but that weekend all the PCs went out to the dump with the hard drives removed, of course. And I drove to the Apple store, bought new Macs for everybody. They came in Monday morning and looked at me and like, "What happened?" Because none of them had ever used Macs before. I'd used them in college and even first year I practiced, and so by Wednesday of that week, though, everybody was happy as clam, had made the transition and so forth, and I couldn't pry their Macs out of their cold dead hands at that point if I wanted to. So as far as the Apple's perception, in 2005, Apple was just kind of beginning the great comeback, and so I feel like we've been along for the ride of their resurgence. Not that I've had anything to do with that, I haven't, but just being a part of it and being able to reap all the benefits from that, to see the transition from the PowerPC chips to Intel and all the things that have come along with that, then the iPhone, now the iPad, it's been a great ride.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And obviously you're working in a little bit of a smaller practice. You talk about making the change over. Even just here at LexBlog, when we work with large law firms, making the switch just to doing something they haven't done in blogging can be a bit of a challenge. And obviously, there are things like enterprise software and whatnot that come when you think about a large law firm making the switch from PCs to Macs. While there are challenges associated with it, what benefits do you think a large law firm would see in making the switch over from PCs to Macs?
Well, and I've never been in a very large firm. The largest firm I've ever been in had 4 lawyers. So, but I will say that for a small firm, the main benefit is cost savings. Mm-hmm. And I think for a large firm, it would be incrementally more cost savings. For instance, I literally went from having my tech guy come in once a month, maybe once every 2 weeks, to now maybe once a year. He still keeps up our network, and he's got our firewall set up and all that. I don't do network stuff. So he'll come in from time to time to deal with that. But I don't have a tech budget now for paying him to come in. Mm-hmm. Large firms that I've taught with, consulted with in the past have said, not only did their costs go down from having to replace, hardware that doesn't work, but even to maybe phasing out their IT person, or at least being able to repurpose the IT person to do other things other than running around from floor to floor, unlocking the PC or figuring out what's wrong with it.
Yeah, just having somebody more proactive.
Yeah, and it, for big firms, I've talked to some of the IT people before, and that's all they really do is go from office to office, fixing PC after PC, and I don't think none of them seem overly satisfied with that aspect of their job.
Yeah.
And certainly all those guys are well capable to do more, to go into keeping up their website or do blogging or whatever. And I think that's a much better use than being a TV repairman for a computer or something. So
yeah, definitely. It's just making that initial investment. People are always worried about the software, and then probably the initial cost of the hardware as well. But once you get rolling, it really all kind of takes care of itself.
Well, and what I found is that the lifespan of PCs, at least for me, was always 18 to 24 months. Mm-hmm. Every Mac I've ever bought is still functional. The PowerBooks that I bought for me and my partner at the time back in 2005 still work. My kids use them at my house. Mm-hmm. The iMac that's on my receptionist desk, we've had for at least 5 years. Now my immediate assistant and myself both have newer ones, but the older ones, they work forever. And so what you find is, the Mac may cost a little bit more, and it's really not as people tend to think it's going to be a whole lot more on the front end to buy one. It's really not when you look at it spec for spec. But the lifespan and the the not having the maintenance part of it makes it a great investment, and they hold their value. I mean, that's the other part is, if I want to sell any of my Macs now, there's a market out there. There are companies that'll buy these used Macs, even that are years old, refresh them and resell them, and you can't give away old PCs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we see the same thing at LexBlog of just those computers just last a long time. Going on to one other thing, you always hear about Apple's biggest headway lately has been a lot with the iPad. You hear things not coming in necessarily through the tech departments and people implementing those, but just higher up lawyers, higher up corporate executives just bringing their iPads to meetings, and tech people don't know how to react. How big has the iPad been in the legal industry thus far? What have you seen the impact there?
I think it's made great inroads, and I think it's going to benefit Apple in the long run, because now, I used to say that the Mac Mini was the gateway drug for people getting into Macs because it was so cheap. Now it's the iPad, and then it was the iPhone, but now it's the iPad. I was in court this morning, and two attorneys were over there waiting on hearings with me that are two attorneys I wouldn't have thought that I would ever see have a notebook computer or something with them. They both have their iPads, and they're sitting there working while we're waiting.
Yeah.
And so, lawyers, and this from working with them, lawyers are always the last adapters of any new technology. But the iPad is so easy to use, and it does so many different things for so many different people because of the number of apps and the ease with which they can be used, that attorneys can really find those 5 or 10 apps that they like to make themselves more efficient, use them, be better lawyers, provide better client to the service to their clients, and be happier because they're more productive, and of course they can make more money too. So I think the iPad's made huge inroads, and even things like trial presentation. I had somebody call me yesterday to interview me about what apps can lawyers use for trial, and there's an app out there called TrialPad that's like $90, which is extremely expensive for an app, but it replaces desktop programs that cost thousands of dollars, and it does basically the same thing. And it does it better because the lawyer can be in front of a jury with just the iPad running this presentation themselves, instead of having another guy there with them running the presentation, and not have that barrier between themselves and the jury other than just the iPad, which is the same thing as having a legal pad there.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there are jury selection apps, and I mean there are all these new apps being created just for lawyers that I think it's just amazing.
And lastly, what do you think the future holds? Are we going to see even more mass adoption in the legal industry? Do you think it'll be slow, or do you think it's going to start to pick up at an even more exponential rate?
I've seen it just increasing exponentially. Now, when I started my blog back in maybe 2007 or whenever it was, several years ago, I did it on a whim because there were no legal blogs about Macs at that point. I had my family law blog with you guys, and I thought, well, I'll just start this to put stuff up there for myself. And next thing you know, it's the Mac. Well, it's taking on a life of its own. But I think we're going to see more of that. And the adoption rate of Macs that I see, like at Tech Show every year. When I started speaking there, 4 years ago, we'd see maybe 10%. The next year it's 20%. And so it's a noticeable increase year after year. And when I speak at conferences, even here in South Carolina, which South Carolina's a lot of things, but cutting edge is not one of them. Even the conference I speak at here, I see those apples glowing back at me in the crowd taking notes. And so, as more software becomes web-based, I think that removes the barrier that lawyers perceive there to be, because they can't use their own program that they've been used to using. So as things become more web-based and you can just choose your appliance to plug into that data, I think the Mac market share is just going to continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for your time. Once again, this is Ben Stevens, author of The Mac Lawyer. Be sure to check out his blog. And once again, Ben, thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Colin.